You've got all these registers that create different tones.
Yeah, my wife.
And so having an idea of like what tones are appropriate.
That's our neighbors a lot.
Are you ready?
All right,
We need to get started. But before we get started and push the button, we need to congratulate Kayhan for passing the VIT last week.
Hey!
I will congratulate myself, thank you.
Tell us what that is first.
Engineering training.
Is that like a colonoscopy or?
I can officially be in training now. I'm just kidding. No.
Engineering training is the EIT, and then, in a couple years or another year, he'll go and take his all-day 7-8 hour PE exam, which is gonna be.
I thought in Utah you could take the PE exam like immediately. Is that not true?
Yeah, they don't give you your actual license until you have 4 years of experience.
Anyway,
Thank you.
let everybody know.
Thank you. Okay, well, it's a minute past 12:30, so we can go ahead get started. Channel 17, are you ready? I'm assuming you are. If you are, please go ahead, start recording.
Usually right ready. Well, but 10 minutes ago, we were.
Yeah. Got him unmute, and then they got muted back. Channel 17, are you ready? Okay, we can get started. Thank you.
All right, everyone, welcome to our January 2024 TMAC meeting. Thank you so much for coming. Let's get started with introductions. Lisa, would you start with for us? Great. I'll go around the table.
I'm Lisa Jensen. I am a TMAC member as a Planning Commission representative.
Bowden Golding Development Services, Provo City.
Jen DeVerschio, Park and Program Manager, Provo City.
I'm Greg McFarland. I'm a TMAC member.
Global Development Services Rep with Long Range Planning and Sustainability.
Hey, Hanshur with Provo Public Works Engineering.
I'm George Handley. I'm on the City Council District 2, and I'm one of the liaisons to TMAC. Are you the other? Okay, soon. I know you're everywhere, Catrice, so I
Noah Gordon, and am I a TMAC alternate still?
Not as of January 1st.
So I have graduated to full TMAC status.
Wow. I thought something.
Well, it's that glow.
Judy Johnson with Provo City Engineering.
Joseph Gandy with Provo Public Works. Gordon Haight with Provo Public Works Engineering.
Herb Giesler with Provo City Engineering.
I'm Catrice McKay. I'm with George on the Council, and I'm citywide. Beth Province Valley Good. Joy McMurray, TMAC Chair. I wanted to give a quick shout out to my husband Joey, who's here today. In all my years of TMAC service, this is his first meeting he's in, so now he knows what we do. But that reminded me, I'd like to say thanks to each of you and your families who all support you in our efforts to make Provo the best it can be. So thank you to everyone and your support group. First action item today is to approve our minutes from October. If you recall, we didn't meet in December because employees were off that day. And in November, our TMAC meeting, we went to go support the opening of the new pedestrian bridge. I had 3 sick kids that day and was not able to go, but I know some members were able to go, and that was very much worth celebrating. So, the only one there? No, I think Greg was there. Not Greg, Jeff. Jeff was there.
I was not there.
Jeff was there. So let's go all the way back to October. Anyone like to motion that we approve the minutes? Minutes of October. And all in favor? Great. Okay. And we're not quite as formal as the council on some rules of order, but next we are very happy to have George and Catrice here. our new liaisons for this year. We've had Bill Fillmore's been in for a long time, and we've enjoyed working with him, but we're very, very happy to have you with us. And George is starting the year off with a bang. You're going to have a presentation on biking infrastructure from your experiences, I presume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is sort of like what I did for vacation last summer, if you guys don't mind, if I share family slides and so on. But first of all, thank you, and thank you for all you do. I know Catrice and I are very interested in everything you do, and very happy to work as liaisons with you. And Joy was talking to me earlier about finding ways to work more collaboratively together, and so I certainly welcome that. I had the opportunity, well, first of all, I brought a book, which I hope to leave with some of you or one of you, Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. So maybe this is for Vernon and Gordon. I don't know if you've heard of this book. This is the author, Charles Marone, who wrote Strong Towns. It's a wonderful book about sort of ways to rethink city engineering and street design in ways that are more healthy and less dependent on the automobile. I think for me, knowing what an extraordinary financial cost it is for individuals and for cities to invest in the infrastructure for automobiles and to have automobiles and to maintain automobiles, we often don't really do the calculus and say, is it normal that we spend that much of our annual income on cars? And of course, there's also, as we now know, a tremendous environmental cost to using automobiles with fossil fuels. And so I think for me, I'm always trying to figure out some way to reduce that cost, either financially or environmentally, however I can individually. And for me, running for city council was one way that I thought I could help contribute to a collective effort, because as a governing body on the city council and as an advisory body to the council, we have an opportunity to imagine and create policy that could help reduce some of those costs, because the city spends an enormous amount of money on infrastructure for cars, and that has, again, not only a financial cost, but it has environmental costs as well. So when I did spend the spring of last year in Munich for 2 months, and then I spent a couple of weeks traveling with my wife in Copenhagen and Sweden. And then later in the summer, Rachel Whipple and I, her husband and I collaborate at BYU on some things, and we had an academic conference, and Rachel and her husband participated in the conference with me, and it was in Portland, and Portland has been the #1 biking city in the country, although Minneapolis just passed them, and they were very upset about that, and they were gunning to get it back. And so one of the activities at the conference was to take a bike tour of the city with the city engineer of Portland. And that was really interesting. And so I shared these slides and some of the information I'll share with you with the Bike Walk Provo people. And I was just kind of obsessed with documenting all these amazing intersections. And so I assume you're all geeks about things like this. So
welcome to my life, George.
What's that?
Welcome to my life.
Yeah, I know. So
intersections.
I was just geeking out about intersections the whole time I was there. And this is a 3-way intersection here. This is the same intersection, just viewed from different angles. But you can see in this particular case, for whatever reasons that I can't remember, the bike path comes down the left side of the road in order to safely cross over here down that street. So this is just looking at it in reverse, coming this way. But this is very typical. In Munich, by the way, I did not expect that Munich was going to be such an extraordinary biking city. I sort of had heard of Copenhagen, but Munich was extraordinary. I rented a bike for 2 months. I never had to get into a car, or I never even used mass transit, not once. I rode my bike everywhere, and people were biking with, you say, well, how do they do it in the weather? I mean, this was in the spring. It was quite wet. You would be amazed at the creativity that people have with keeping themselves dry. There are sort of coats that extend over your handlebars, for example, so you're not just keeping your chest dry, but your entire legs and hands are completely dry. All ages, every single demographic you can imagine was biking in the street. So do I just click right and go? Okay. And you'll see a variety of different, like you'll see bike paths that are up on the curb. These are bike paths that are in the street. And this is almost, you'll see a combination of a different material used for the bike paths. In other cases, it's just painted, but it's continuous. You are never, if I go anywhere in the city, I am always directed in some way, shape, or form to a bike path. And this, some of these are videos, so you can just get a feel for it. And as most, engineers are telling us now with regard to, more biking-friendly infrastructure, it slows traffic down, it increases safety significantly. I never once in the 2 months had any sort of risky encounter with a car. I never had anyone flip me off, which, happens every so often in Utah. And this is, they also have a river that's, of course, much bigger than Provo River, but it's a lovely Isar River that runs through Munich, and they have exploited that river so well and so beautifully, and they have pedestrian and then separate bike paths. So that's one way they keep, and you'll see some examples where they have to combine them, but they still keep them safe. Not like our 9th East has extra wide for both, but we don't stripe them at all. And I think that's a risk that we should probably think about fixing. You can see the pedestrians there. And you can go, these are wide enough that you can go in either direction. I mean, it's sort of typically understood that when they're two, you can go on the right side. But in this case, there's a city sidewalk on the other side of the street, and this is the main thoroughfare for bikes. And then it gets out into something similar to our Provo River trails by the river. There's paved trails all along the river. Here's an interesting barrier that I like. This looked to me relatively inexpensive compared to other alternatives. And you engineers would know more than I, but it also looks to me like it's pop up or pop down or disassembly is possible in certain situations. And you can see here an alternative version of that. These barriers kept me feeling very safe. And then you have like the sidewalk that's multiple. So you have the pedestrian, if you can see my little arrow here, this is the pedestrian trail or path, sidewalk over here. This is the biking path. And so they're separate, so they're kept safe. And then of course you have all these intersections where this is a major street, by the way, and you can see that they've significantly narrowed it and significantly widened these sidewalks so that there's lots of pedestrian and bike traffic, and then there's tons of commercial activity going on constantly. I mean, there are all kinds of cafes and places. And this is another version of the integration of a bike path with the pedestrian sidewalk where it's just a different material, and there's maybe like a ½ inch bumper between the two, so you can go on to the sidewalk if you have to, but it sort of keeps you separate.
It's sorry to interrupt. There's an interesting background to this. Mercedes-Benz and BMW are both headquartered in Munich. Like this is Germany's motor city. They are not like anti-car when they do these things. They're doing because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
There are Detroit.
That's right.
Here you can see a bike path that is then brought onto the sidewalk. There clearly was not the infrastructure there to allow for a separate bike path, but it's clearly marked, and you have the nice dotted lines there to sort of indicate the merging of the two. But this is an example of how you just always continue the flow through intersections. Here's another version of a tighter space for a bike path. This is actually out in the country of a neighboring city, but it's just another, one of our projects on the council is trying to figure out how to make better use of our river. And I was very interested in how German towns and cities made good use of their rivers. This is you can see here a sort of public space all the way from the riverbank. I don't know how many feet that is, maybe 100 or so setback, where it's just grass and people are, of course, if you know Germany, they're, if the weather gets warm, they're stripping their clothes and they're lying there right on the grass. But they're fully taking advantage of the warm, beautiful areas. And then this is a tighter space where there was an old medieval wall. Obviously, they didn't want to move, but they still made it work for pedestrians and for bikers.
Were the pedestrians on the riverside and the bikes are on the inside?
Yeah. And then this is an example. I know we've got something similar on the pedestrian bridge, but all the subway stations have these grooves in the stairwells, so that these are two different versions of them, so that you can walk your bike up and down the stairs without having to awkwardly bump it around and so on. I know there was a little bit of concern with the pedestrian bridge about whether or not it was wide enough for some of the handlebars. I don't know if that was ever resolved. There was some talk. Yeah, you sort of have to lean it a little bit. Yeah.
On the bikes that you saw, have they gotten into e-bikes yet, or it's mostly traditional bikes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was super interested in that. My bike was not. It was just, by the way, it was like 30 euro a month to rent a bike, and it had a built-in lock. So everywhere I go, there's so many bikes there that I probably could have gotten away with not locking it. I don't know. But lots and lots of e-bikes and lots of cargo bikes for kids. So there were just tons of families riding.
Did the e-bikes use the same infrastructure as the regular bikes?
Yeah.
And did their speed match yours, or did it
because
go faster?
because there's so much traffic on those spaces. I mean, I assume that, and I did see e-bikes. If there's nobody there, I'm sure they go a lot faster. But during the rush hour times of the day, they really can't afford to go much faster than everybody else anyway. I mean, they might be able to, there's a sort of etiquette when you're riding and someone else is riding, and after a while you say, I'm kind of going a little slower than I'd like, but you don't do something reckless and ride into the.
Posted that says speed, about speed?
No, I never saw any signage about speed. Yeah. It was almost like it was almost like self-regulated. Yeah.
On that previous picture with the subway ones, could e-bikes use those ramps just as well, or all those cargo bikes with kids, like those, it seems narrow for that unless they tip them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I don't know if I saw anybody, honestly, e-bikes are pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So my suspicion is that people who have e-bikes, especially the larger cargo bikes, are not going down these at all. These are more for like the city bike. And some people, of course, have these compact bikes that are very small, but like the bike I was using was just a standard, I don't know if it's like a 10-speed urban bike that has the handlebars out like this, but it would handle that really, really easily. And I would say, a good 70% of all the bikes are in that kind of a category. E-bikes are not. This is actually Copenhagen, which is, internationally known for its biking infrastructure. And you can see, this is how many bikes are parked at the metro stations. It's just unbelievable. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, while we were talking about e-bikes, did you see any other form of motorized transportation, like big wheels, scooters, or anything like that?
There are some of those pedestrian ones, the electrified pedestrian ones, but not very many, and not very many motorized scooters.
So not a whole bunch of motorized small transportation.
Yeah, it's pretty much, this has become kind of the predominant. They actually, I think maybe I have a picture of it, that, this is just to give you an idea of how many. I mean, it does create a problem that you have to solve through engineering. If you have that many people biking, then you got to figure out where they're all going to park their bikes and how you're going to make space for that. And this is a video just to give you an idea. This is in Copenhagen again. If you just think of each biker as a car that was replaced, right, you can see how much space is preserved, right? This is what I think is so amazing about this, is that for every biker, if you were to imagine there being a car, you would have an intersection that was backed up for 10 minutes of waiting just for the light to turn, right? But the bikers all kind of gather, the light turns green, and off they go. And you have this,
The light just for bikers.
Yeah.
yeah, that's another thing, is that at every intersection in Munich and in Copenhagen, they have like a separate light for bikers.
Sometimes they give them the
Yeah.
entire.
So I mean, these are beautiful. I love these videos. I love the scenery. What is the weather like in Copenhagen?
Very cold.
And do they still ride this amount?
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
I used to live in Copenhagen and can confirm, yes, everyone
Yeah.
rides all the time. And there's not much snow buildup, however, because it's coastal. So it's freezing, it is often rainy, but they don't have the snow removal problem.
But I
But
think
they
it's
do
also
have
worth remembering that the number one U.S. metro area for biking is Minneapolis.
That's what impressed me.
Yeah.
Really? Go to Minneapolis.
No, I mean, I'm
There's a lot
a
colder around
year-round
here than here.
I'm a year-round biker, and I have an e-bike, which I confess has made my biking even more attractive than when I used to, because I live on a steep hill, and I used to have to come home at the end of the day and walk into the house panting, you know? It's like, hey, honey, I'm home. And I'm like dripping with sweat, you know? And then I started having to go to city council meetings, and I was like, I don't want to show up sweaty. So the e-bike has saved that well. But if you get the right gloves, the right, head protection gear for the cold, I can handle just about any temperature. I mean, it's not fun going 20 miles an hour on an e-bike in 15-degree weather. I'm not going to lie. I did try once. I went out to the airport for one of our big launches of the airport way back, and it was 15 degrees, and I'm like, I'm biking out there. And it's like a 30-minute ride on my e-bike, and, minute 20, I was like, I don't feel my hands. I don't think my face is there anymore.
One other thing that Minneapolis does, though, that helps is they have municipal snow removal of bike lanes. And a lot of sidewalks too. So they've invested in some of that.
This video gives you another glimpse of just just imagine each of those as a car. That's kind of how I like to think of it. And as I was counting, I'm actually talking on this video, but I was counting the cars compared to the bikers, right? They're totally outnumbered. And that isn't even, the rush hour. There's moments in the rush hour where it's extraordinarily disproportionate in terms of bikers versus cars. And you can see, if you just pay attention to, ages, body sizes, demographics of people biking, it's everything. It really is extraordinarily fun to see. And people are talking to each other. This is the other thing about biking that, it just sort of builds community. In the same way that mass transit kind of forces you to sit with people, you're often at intersections together and, talking. And then this is a little pier area that used to be like a rundown industrial part of the city that was totally polluted. And they've completely restored it into these swimming docks. And the Scandinavians will swim in any temperature. This was very early summer, and they thought it was 90 degrees and they were in Cancun, but it's such a fun place. They built all of these apartment complexes, and everyone's living right there, and this is their favorite evening activity, is to just jump out, stretch out a towel, and hang out. And then my wife and I did a bike tour of Sweden, which I've been trying to tell Catrice that she needs to do with her husband, but she won't, she's not convinced yet. But this is a new national trail they're currently building in Sweden. This is the first leg of it that goes over 200 miles along the western coast of Sweden. And it is just, stunning. And you're going through little fishing villages, and the entire thing is paved. Just see I take it back. There was an unpaved stretch right there. You can see, this is all coastal area, certainly taking full advantage of the natural beauty around it. This is kind of interesting. These are different street slowing measures, which I think about in terms of some of our speeding problems. Those are flower boxes on the right, and those are just, I think, little bollards on the left. The flower boxes really appealed to me. I mean, they're totally movable.
Wow.
They're just right in the middle of the street, so if you're driving a car, you have to slow down and go around them. Yeah.
Is that residents doing, or is that the government?
I think it was the government because they were,
I just curious.
yeah,
It's been initiated.
So how many people did you, when you were going on the big long trail, how many people did you come across?
we were there kind of early season, so, not a lot. I was pretty surprised at how quiet it was, but I think maybe later in the summer it gets busier,
I have a question.
but it wasn't a problem, yeah.
For both of you that have been in Copenhagen, how many of those people on bikes on a regular basis do you think owned a car? Like they
Good question.
really didn't have cars and bikes were their only thing, or do you think they just were
Yeah.
commuting by bike?
I mean, I think the vast majority of them do not, but I don't have any data on that.
Do you have any experience
Of
in
the
that?
families that I knew, I would say maybe 1 and 2 out of 5 had a car, and they didn't use it very often.
It was very expensive to get a driver's license.
And gas is a lot more expensive.
The entry cost,
I mean, it's like $8 a gallon, I think, compared to our prices.
it's very hard to get a driver's license, and its entry costs are much higher.
So I've been doing a lot of research with a professor in Munich who does urban modeling and auto ownership and stuff. And a lot of upper middle income families and middle income families have cars, but almost no family has 2 cars. That's the big difference between that culture and this one.
That's definitely true. I mean, we were in apartments in Munich and in Copenhagen. We were staying with friends in Copenhagen, and they, none of the people we met had cars. But I'm sure people do. But the problem is there's not a lot of parking. So that's another issue. It's not only is it expensive, and it's not actually all that efficient. I mean, they also have a great transit system to get from, one city to another. Whereas, you and I want to go to Moab, we can't take the train, right?
If you want to go to Springville, you can.
Population density of these.
Oh, do you know, Greg?
Munich's overall region-wide population density is not that much higher than the Salt Lake Valley.
I was going to guess. it's
Overall
similar to
wide,
Salt
I'm
Lake.
talking about in the city where it was.
The city center, Munich is,
Where there's biking
I mean, it's not like Hong Kong or New York, right? It's like most buildings are 3 or 4 stories high.
Yeah, there are not a lot of high rises. It is flat. Both cities are flat. This is Portland, by the way. And this is a old shipyard that's been turned into this long grassy park that's used for public festivals and food markets. And so it's a kind of grass that's, usable to trample on. There is a pedestrian and bike-only bridge in Portland, which is really amazing. Rachel and I took a ride over this thing. This is the left image is a really tricky intersection where there's a ramp going onto a highway, and yet you've got this bright green paint. The city engineer told us that, and I think I've mentioned this to either of you, but of course, the governor, the state government of Oregon passed a law requiring like a 1% be spent on biking and walking infrastructure in every city in Oregon. And I don't know if it's 1% of their budget, of their transportation budget. Yeah. And yeah, this guy, and he's, by the way, that's him in the bike ahead of me. He's willing to zoom in and talk with us and answer any questions. I was peppering him with questions about financing. I was like, how did this happen? And he said that was the catalyst. And then Portland just said, we're going to be number 1. But he said that, I said, you build all this infrastructure, it's got to cost a lot of money to maintain it. And he helped me understand that the biggest cost to infrastructure maintenance is heavy trucks. And so if you have bike paths that are only being used by bikers, there's not the same kind of damage level as you would see in a regular street where, big semis are riding by, or even like Amazon Prime trucks are constantly, or garbage trucks, right? So he said that these paint jobs and the strips that they put in there don't need the kind of maintenance that the rest of the streets typically do. And then this bridge was built to be only for pedestrians and mass transit and bikes. I wish you could hear how quiet it is. It's ridiculously quiet. And there's bridges in both directions. I don't remember which river this is, or bay.
This is the Willamette River.
Willamette, yeah. It's, you know, they're like triple-decker, quadruple-decker bridges that are just roaring with noise, right? And this is another thing we decided we would put up with, because that's what we have to put up with. And yet, when you ride over that bridge, it's just the most peaceful. There's Rachel on the left. Really, really fun. Anyway, so that's it. That's what I got, what I learned. I just thought maybe there's some ideas there for us to think about in terms of being creative, but I hope that, you know, as we know, the city survey that was done 2 years ago now, the number one concern people had was traffic, which, you know, is relative to where you're used to living. I mean, I lived in the Bay Area for 10 years, and I'm like, you guys don't know what traffic is like. You know, but that's not to say that we shouldn't be worried, right? I mean, we know that as the city grows, if we're not smart about the way we design things, we can't keep plugging up the streets with more cars. There has to be some active transportation solution to help mitigate. It's not that, my personal view is that, you know, we certainly need to make sure that the city is drivable for the people who need to drive. And you know, in an earlier phase of my life, I was very much in that category with young kids needing to go to music lessons and soccer practices and so on. But if we can make our community more mobile through active transportation, then that just reduces some of the pressure points that those needs can create when you have more people needing them, right? Yeah.
I just have two quick. When you need active transportation.
Well, active transportation meaning anything that you use your body to do, but of course, you know, e-bikes make it seem as if there's a gray area.
E-bikes, yeah.
E-bikes would be
There's
considered.
a huge gray area coming into our community. And my next question is, while you were touring all these cities in Portland, I know Portland's probably more Americanized than European cities. Do you see other forms of that transportation? Like, did you see bike-assisted mopeds or anything like that? Small motorized vehicles, paths like that?
No. I mean, other than occasional, what are they called? Segways?
Segways.
I think I saw a few of those, but not as many like the motorized skateboards that we're seeing. I didn't see very many of those. And I don't know what the reason for that is, other than the fact that everything's so bikeable that it just seems like everybody had a bike, you know, and that was. And there's lots of mass transit in both of those cities. Yeah. I mean,
so their mass transit infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. They have all that biking infrastructure, and then they have a metro system and a tram system. So it's like they're giving you 3 reasons not to drive, and I think the only reason people are driving is if they're, you know, coming in from out of town, or, you know, they're transporting some materials that can't get there any other way, or, you know, but there's just so much less incentive to get into the car. And of course, then there is a tipping point, right, where it suddenly becomes very safe and usable for children.
Yeah.
Kids can get on the tram, they can ride their bikes, and get themselves to school, I mean, that sort of thing.
I'm assuming in most of these cities where they work is very close to where they can do.
Not
that.
necessarily.
Often not in Copenhagen, no, which is part of where this multi-pronged system comes in, because people can bike to the nearest metro stop, take the metro in with their bike on the metro, and then bike the rest of the way.
But there is like a very established metro able to transport your bike where you need to go and then use your bike to get to the end point.
Yeah, the metro sort of works like a radial system coming out, so people can then use that to cover greater distances, and then anything getting to or from or around within the city is largely.
So a bike is usually within a city, not spreading.
Yeah,
Some mega commuters do it.
You know, Europe has a lot of advantages that we don't have. Like their streets were not built for cars initially, right? So their streets are a lot narrower, and so it's not, we sort of designed our cities around the car, and that's why we have these very, very wide streets. Yeah. But that, of course, encourages speeding, right? So they've taken advantage of some of their spatial history. So I don't pretend that all of that's mappable, easily modeled in Provo, but I think maybe it stimulates some ideas for how we could create it.
I think there's fortunately some of my have a lot more versus older streets.
We can narrow a street.
Well, but what I'm saying is that it's still public space that we can use for other.
Doesn't Portland have some hilly areas?
Mm-hmm.
So how did they handle the bike lanes in those areas? How do people just power up them?
Or they use a train or something to get to the top. They have trams, aerial trams also in Portland in a couple places.
There are parts of Denmark. There are parts of Denmark that are pretty hilly as well, outside of Copenhagen. Lived in some of those as well. And people do just bike up the hill, but there's little convenience infrastructure built in along that bike path. Like at any point, they might have to stop. There's a little angled place where you can put your foot to kick off again, so you don't lose your momentum on the hill. There are really easy little systems that facilitate it.
I think it's also worth noting that a lot, like a city that hasn't come up is Berlin, but Berlin was mostly rebuilt in the second half of the 20th century by Americans around the car. And they've actually done a lot in the last 20 years or so to make it more like Munich. And so there's some European cities that were built as car first places that are choosing to be something different.
We did do one day of biking in Berlin.
Yeah, and it's not as good as Munich, but it's better than most American cities.
It's that continuous flow that's really appealing, and of course Google Maps really helps you with that. Say I'm going by bike, and and Provo does. Our Google Maps here works really responsive. I use it to get here. To get to this building, it'll tell you, by bike you should go this way. More time than I said.
This is great, and active transportation is probably on our agenda in one form or another every single month, and it's very important in Provo, and thank you so much, George, for that. The next item, I'm hoping to very briefly just say, especially to George and Catrice, one of our TMAC presentations last year was regarding an update on road maintenance, the situation and the cost, and we discovered, we discovered that in this case, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is very, very true. The cost to maintain a road is much, much, much less than the cost to repair roads. And we thought that with many new council members coming in and with budget discussions happening, this is something we would like to make the council aware of as you're making those decisions. As George was saying, the cost to maintain roads over time are really astronomical, and one way to fight that is introduce active transportation. Another is to maintain them properly so we don't have these huge repair costs later on. We wanted to kind of communicate some of the details of that to the council. We would like to know as TMAC, what is the best way? Do you want a memo? Do you want a presentation? How would things be best received? Last year, we attempted to send a letter regarding a different issue with the bike transportation master plan that we kind of went over. It was 10 years old that no one was using. We said, hey, here's the parts that have been integrated. Here's the parts we need to do still, things to keep in mind. And I don't know how that was received or if that was helpful, but we would love to know in this specific case, how should we communicate to you? And then more generally, how can TMAC, and we could maybe talk about this for next month, how can TMAC best serve the council? Since it is our job to support you, to advise you on transportation issues, how do we do that job most effectively? I was telling George and Catrice, I don't think in my almost 5 years now in TMAC that we have ever been asked by the council specifically to do anything to help them. So we've had our own things we've been working on in that, and we've tried to make the best of it. But we would like to really support you in effective ways as much as we can.
My gut would be to say that this would be a really beneficial thing to work. We're always interested in how much this costs, right? And
Yes,
as far
right.
as, like you're saying, maintenance, are we not doing enough maintenance such that we are incurring the higher cost to repair? Like, would need that kind of information. I think that'd be amazing to do a work. And ideally, I think you'd want to get that in before our next budget priorities, which is February 15th.
Yeah, we just had a preliminary budget priorities meeting Tuesday. Not writing in stone yet, but we're trying to send to the administration what we consider to be our priorities, budgeting, as they plan to draft this budget. We then end up reviewing and deciding if we approve it. That there's sort of more feedback built into the system early on, rather than like waiting until May to get a draft that we know nothing about, which is how it used to be done. And then you feel like, oh, I guess I have to approve it, otherwise we don't have a budget.
So with this information data that you have at present,
Yeah, so Dave Mickelson, one of the city employees, presented it to us, and he can come present it to you.
yes, that's fantastic.
We just wanted to say, hey, this is important. We listened to many, many presentations, and this is one that we felt had a relatively huge impact on the budget in a way that you could prevent costs later by preventing them now.
So ideally, we'd love to hear that February 6th in a work meeting. So that means you need to get that in the next week or so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that we talked about after we saw that presentation was that the transportation fee that's built into the utility bill is not enough to cover that.
Not
And so we
remotely.
were doing the just preliminary math in our heads going, every 30 years, that should cost this amount of money, but we're only bringing in this much combined with the budget. And so all of us were kind of panicking going, does the city council realize that the math doesn't compute because there's absolutely no way we're going to replace roads on more than a 100-year basis with the current funds? So that was a big deal.
That fee is something we are prioritizing this year to look at and figure out, for example, BYU would just pay anything towards that. That's a huge chunk, right? And they bring in a lot of drivers and people into the city. So we need to do a study to get the numbers correct to begin with. We need to rewrite the language such that nonprofits pay the tax also for the fee, not tax. Right now, the legislature is looking at it, and we're expecting some legislation to come through, so we're kind of waiting to see what they do. It's not with us doing something that we get changed based on the state legislature. But from what we know, the state legislatures are going to make it so no one can be exempt. Everyone has to pay it, for one, which is a huge plus. No exemption. And then another part is going to be that you do a study every 10 years. So we're past that 10-year mark. So we're due a study anyway. So we're going to do an all comprehensive thing this year that will take a considerable amount. I mean, I'm sure it'll take 6 months.
Well, and I would say, I mean, the nice thing is that we have the council chair on liaison, so, and we have 2 of us, so as long as, our policy is as long as 2 council.
We do that every 6.
And she'll have a sense better than I will of like what the crowdedness of the agenda already looks like. But my feeling is that you should request what you think would be best. Like if you think a presentation to us is really what would be warranted, ask. And if we can't fit you in or we disagree, we'll say that. But I'd rather you guys get more exposure to the council and vice versa than the status quo. And we have had, the sustainability committee makes a presentation once a year. So I think you guys should be before us at least once a year in my view. And if there's ever a specific issue that you want to bring to our attention, if you feel like a letter will do it, the report that you sent before I thought was very helpful. So anytime you want to communicate with us just in writing, that's also fine. It just depends on what you think would be best.
Yeah, I know something that we love, and the Energy Board is, I think, the only that does that. But when they present to us, they have one of their board members. So say the Energy Board, like we just did, we made it so you could resell energy to do fast charging, right? So when that's presented to us on that, he brought an Energy Board member to confirm, yes, we're talking about this, the board is 100% on board with it. Like, we love that. We love hearing from a citizen not an elected official, not a paid, you know, city administrator, employee, giving us.
We like those people too, don't get it.
I get it. I went to a bureaucrat or resident.
This is awesome to hear from residents on committees, right? To hear what, we love that. So, yeah, I would suggest anytime you think there's something, send it to us, and then best case, it'll be worth a work meeting. Otherwise, we say, hey, Joe, this is great, you should memo on this. I can also think that, we should just set up like a yearly time, you know, a year that would make sense overview.
Later in the year is better because we do the budget the first half of the
Like
year.
October.
You might have more to report, you know, in the fall or something.
We usually do, I think, with the way that cycles work.
So the only thing I wanted to comment on before we bring something, I think it'd be good to show the administration. So I don't know if we need to deadline, so we probably have, always good to have a bureaucrat stop in. But doing my job, then it's-
Yeah, this is why they don't want you at their meetings.
Just a wet blanket.
We probably need to do a little bit of stuff to get it ready, to make sure we are not showing you, we haven't shown anything else to anybody else. We just need to make sure we have a little process that we're.
And do that part of the process, right?
So we need to
before
do
you
some
come to
steps
us, it
before
does
we-
go through.
So let's continue the discussion. I don't think, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying we have to.
February 6th isn't realistic, is what you're saying?
No.
So
Just
maybe,
there, it would be challenging to get something.
Okay, well, I think it would also be useful to not just have the presentation that Dave gave, but also the numbers that I think it was Vern gave with the comparisons to what other cities.
that's very helpful.
Because Provo's way, even though we were the first one in the game, we're way low.
We're behind
And I
on the
think
game.
that's good data to have as well.
Well, when 52% of the city's not paying.
It's hard, yeah, and that's one of our unique challenges with Provo. Is our,
We just updated those numbers, I think I sent them to you now. So we are looking at that, and there's kind of a process that we're going through the budget process as a department. Back to the administration.
And this does really fall more under the transportation fee than it does per se. So as part of our budget stuff, but I mean, that's all going to be deeply looked
Kind of like BYU, expected to pay something initially, I'm not sure if they're paying, will not contribute at
The
all.
hospital pays the fee.
They pay
They're
fee about
they pay
every
the fee
other
every
month.
They pay the full amount, but they do it in 6 payments as opposed to once a month, which we use.
I like not.
BYU gives us money upfront for the first 5 years. They are 7 years delinquent. We want to phrase it that.
And then there's other NDs.
They're like, we did, we've got
I was a consultant.
We paid this.
That brought transportation. And I did that in cooperation with Dave Graves in the city, we were the first city to.
It's gone through the Supreme Court now where it's been, you know, okay. So that's why the legislature, so it's popped up everywhere now. So that's why the legislature is looking at it and they are going to make guidelines on it. But they all seem to be in our favor, you know, that's good guidelines. So I mean, we should be doing the same, right? And everyone should pay equally, you know, so.
maybe I can talk with Gordon and Vernon about an appropriate timeline, but consider red flag, raise, hey, city council, pay attention to road maintenance, of the many things that will save you a lot of money long-term. This is
And
one of
this
them.
may be something that comes up in the full transportation piece, which is going to be a huge discussion.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of 3 different dimensions. There's road maintenance, there's sidewalk, curb, and then there's active transportation. All are endlessly expensive, right, if we wanted them.
Right,
I mean, somebody, one of our staff calculated, was it $200 million? If we were to put new sidewalks everywhere in Provo, it'd be 200.
Let's not exaggerate.
Well, 10 million is a lot.
It's not that expensive.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And with engineering, you may put that topic in really different.
yeah, budget of 500,000 a year.
And that's like how long the study was. You know, how
That's
long
what we're
the study
doing
was?
right now.
Well, I did the
It
first one.
doesn't do anything.
Okay.
I mean, it prevents cataclysm in certain neighborhoods, I guess.
But it still pushes it back at 5 more years every year, like it just gets further and further from attainability, the longer we wait to up the fee.
We'll have to see what the legislature, but I agree, I suspect once we got started, it has to be.
Like, I would love to get that study started already, so that we're not behind on the mark. I want this done this year.
We do want to say, but like I said, we want to, the legislature tells us to do the study and say, did you do these
Because
elements?
they may specify.
They're gonna specify some certain elements that they want us to do.
Well, March, right? Is that March first?
Well,
So,
we're done March first.
yeah.
And I suspect that the engineering conference would make. Look at the draft bill, we hate jumping ahead of what they're telling us,
Right.
and so I'm not, everything you're saying is accurate.
We don't want to double our work.
I'm really excited about the opportunity that there are no exemptions in this bill, and then we're following state law.
Yes.
Because about 48% of the properties in use in Provo City are tax exempt. And that's the original reason why we did that, is because we wanted everybody to have to participate, not just the taxable property that was paying the bond. So we stopped bonding, so it's really a financial decision to ensure our future for road maintenance.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your feedback on that. Maybe next month we could hear more from you. Any additional thoughts on issues you'd like us to talk about and other ways we can support council? Any unofficial thoughts?
I do have one
You go ahead,
issue,
Bruce, yeah.
maybe just to like, us to our
Please.
next meeting, but
Yeah.
I'd love to, we get asked a lot about 820 the road, city buying.
Oh, you want to dive
property.
right in on all of our
Yeah.
hot button issues. Okay.
And I never get an update on anything that's going on administratively about that. I don't able to answer those questions, and I'd love to get more as to that whole thing. I just feel like that's a time bomb that's ticking, and it keeps popping up, and it gets pretty explosive right away, but we don't seem to have a whole lot of.
We're 30 to 60 days.
Connectivity was one of our priorities.
Yeah, that was one of our issues we didn't
Well,
get
that's one of
to.
the top survey things we got too from our survey this year, so.
I think anyone who looks at Provo transportation as a whole with an honest lens says, oh, east-west is a challenge, and I think there's implications for that there's this division east-west that we don't like, and a source of great tension for us. So I think that's a key issue. In our last few minutes, we've got Hannah presenting to us about development services, and then Vern, engineering project updates.
I'll try to keep it very brief. I don't have slides for these two, but should update you all that, the council has adopted the Hillside and Canyons and the River and Lakeshore plans. Two separate plans that touch a little bit on transportation, but really within these zones and mostly under the context of recreational
And we
connectivity.
had our first item on the agenda at last night's planning commission meeting that locals,
That's great.
where we had a front-facing development that was facing Provo River so that it was an active pedestrian place instead of backwards.
The map is popping in and out of existence.
I think planning has more to do with transportation than transportation. So it's what you do with the land, how you do the land, is going to complement, really change people's traveling behavior. And so zoning does as much as more, maybe more than infrastructure does. So I'm just saying, Hannah's more important than she let on.
You know, I needed to hear that today, so thank you.
So what she's doing is a really critical stage. You watch that really tells you the direction you're going.
That was something that everybody wanted for the river, I think. So it's a common vision among departments and elected officials. And done. I'm really optimistic for it. I'm glad we've already got opportunities. We have 2 other plans in the works. Both are in fairly early stages, so I want to put these on your radar. Both of these will have technical advisory committees, and that committee will include a representative from TMAC and Planning Commission. So we will be putting those committees together hopefully in the next month or so, and reaching out to discuss availability for volunteering. This is the Northeast Neighborhood Plan, and then the other is the Station Area Plan. Quick update on Northeast. We are meeting with the District 1 neighborhood meeting next week. We'll be surveying some residents. We're doing this plan entirely in-house. We're not working with consultants. We are more familiar with these. It's a small scale, localized adjustment neighborhood. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, it's one of those live virtual ones people can answer and see it pop up on screen. It's more interactive. We are limiting it just to the North Timpview, River Bottoms, and Sherwood Hills neighborhoods in here. So just those top 3, leaving out Riverside, Edgemont, Indian Hills, and Rock Canyon. Simply because there's a little bit more similarity in development among those northern 3 neighborhoods. We've never had a neighborhood plan that's gone bigger than 3 neighborhoods. We find that's a good geographic scope. These 3 also have the most undeveloped land, so they are the most urgently in need of a guiding document. And for these station area plans, these are, I'd say, about 1/3 of the way done through the phase. We contracted with SOMAS to do some existing conditions analysis and some public outreach. We got hundreds of responses on the website and survey, and a little interactive map where people could comment and like each other's comments and debate. It was really fun to see people's pain points and what they thought needed to be improved within these station areas. There are 7 stations that we have to do in this plan, and we're grouping them into 4 locations. 2230 North is its own, Joaquin is its own, the 3 along the northern part of University Avenue are their own, and then you can see the Provo Frontrunner Central Station entirely eclipses 400 South, so that's going to just be one plan. You might also notice that not all of the UVX stations are on there. The reason for that is that for now, the state is only requiring plans for stations that have their own dedicated stop outside of a lane. If it's a shared lane stop, they're not currently requiring a plan. They likely will in the next couple of years, but they split it up and staggered it intentionally so that cities with a lot of UVX stops could do it in phases. Yeah, I was happy to hear that because everyone was really confused. Even MAG didn't know why we didn't have to do all of them. But finally, we talked to someone who helped draft the bill. Basic details, 1/4 mile from UVX, 1/2 mile from Frontrunner. We can't get an impracticability waiver for areas where we cannot plan. For example, that Joaquin station just south of BYU campus, about half of that station area is on campus. We can't legally plan for that. We have no jurisdiction. We can just write that off as a gray area. The plans all have to be adopted by December 31st, 2025. We're aiming for like early, mid 2025, probably around February, March-ish.
I understood. So the 90 stop would also be ineligible, right?
It's not required yet.
Because of,
Mm-hmm.
there's no.
So yeah, and there
Well, it
is.
doesn't exist yet.
It's only imaginary, George.
It's supposed to, soon.
That brings up the very last of these little bullet points. Any stations that are opening after June 1st of a year and a half ago have to have a station area plan before their service can begin. But we don't have to worry about with that with 900 because it's not going to be its own dedicated station. It's going to have a shared lane for the stop.
How's that gonna work?
We'll get
That
that
just
in the
means
next.
the traffic backs up behind it?
It functions like a normal bus stop where it's just going to pull off to the side of the road.
Oh,
instead of
so
having
it's not on the,
separate-
it's not in the
It'll probably
middle?
be like the stadium.
Yeah, it's got like a little
It'll have
pull off,
its own
but it
lane.
doesn't have its own.
BYU, I think
Dedicated lane.
sneakily built that extra lane because they assumed that eventually would change their minds about the desirability of the station. That's my,
It's gonna be by the intersection by the music building, right?
right. So that extra lane there and then where the school is, I'll be able to.
They'll be able to pull it out because they.
I'll show you next month. I'll bring it down.
So happy. I'm so excited.
Yeah, and this doesn't include any, like the station, the
Unlike
mall, any
7
down
years
in East
ago.
Bay.
I
the
know,
ones by
it's
the-
so great, you can be, night and day, night and day, let it be,
Let it be.
let it be.
Since that hornet's nest. ever again.
I would just like to say that was also a planning commission thing, because we argued with BYU about the music building parking
Thank you
so
for that.
much. I think we talked, we are the reason that the music building didn't open when they wanted it to, because we said, you cannot get rid of a parking lot and tell me that the little old lady going to the Kristen Chenoweth concert is going to take public transportation or walk from the Marriott Center. I don't care if you have 14,000 spaces, they're not in proximity to the venue.
And they said, Kristen Chenoweth, when is she coming?
Already came! Okay.
The only other thing that might speed up the timeline on this is there's a qualifying land use application, which the House bill that defined all of this, that as anything that's larger than 15 contiguous acres requires a general plan or zoning amendment.
Although they could add more.
Then you have to have the FAP done for the station area that would include part of that within 1 year. We're not likely to get any of that within our existing station areas. We're already pretty zoned out. These are all pre-built out areas. Almost impossible that we're going to get one of these. Just putting it on your radar. Should one happen miraculously, that will trigger an accelerated timeline. We have to get it done within a year. Each station area plan has to have 4 objectives: increase the availability and affordability of housing, promote sustainable environmental conditions, enhance access to opportunities, and increase transportation choices and connections, especially looking at multimodality and active transportation, micromobility connections. These are coming from the state. And there's some basic components. These should be in the ongoing slide deck. Most of these are on the planning side. Of course, we'll have a map. Of course, we'll have the vision. This is a unique plan because it's required by the state and because they have such set criteria for the contents of the plan and the goals that it has to meet. The municipal planning organization, in our case, MAG, has to approve the plan. So once they go through council for adoption, we will take the completed plan to MAG to be certified. If they have any concerns, they'll send it back to us, but we'll try to work all of that out before we bring it to council in the first place. And we've got a member of MAG who's also going to be on the technical advisory committee, making sure that we're checking the boxes every step of the way. Then it gets included with our moderate income housing report to Development Workforce Services, or Division of Workforce Services. So a longer process for this, but again, hoping to be done in the next year to a year and a half. And as far as TMAC involvement, I'm sure you'll see the plans before we're done with them. You will get a chance to review them before they go to council. We'll also make sure that there's a rep on that technical advisory committee.
Anyone thought Commissioner South lives in that Edgemont, or that, sorry,
And Vern, would you like to present today or wait till next week?
Probably need to show you these
Let's do it.
slides
Let's
real
do it.
quick.
Then allow me to say, generally, we try to keep the meetings to an hour, but we only meet once a month. Once a month for an hour is really not sufficient for the amount of work we have to do. So just prepare yourselves that sometimes we do go over, but we try to keep it as short as possible. So great. Thanks.
In February, UDOT will be starting the Third South construction project that runs from Fifth West over to University Avenue. That will end in November of this year. It will be cut down to one direction eventually, but we're going to have that section and State Street all the way to the north. We've done State Street over east for the University Avenue. Now this little gap project of 4.5 blocks will get done.
When you say it comes down to one lane, you mean during construction or the final project?
During construction, it will be down to one lane in each direction. It will be back open. There will be raised islands throughout the 4 blocks. There will be at First West and Third West, there'll be a bike through traffic transportation.
So very similar to the other side.
Very similar to Second East. A little bit better camera and radar, but they'll probably do push button activation instead of radar activation.
So, Vern, one question about the 300 West, like, are we using the same opportunity to flip the directions of the stop signs on 300 West? Currently, the north-south movements stop, east-west movements go through. And if we're gonna make 300 West a bicycle, we should swap that.
That will require.
Yeah, this this is something that I've brought up a couple times, but it'd be good to make that switch or study whether it can happen.
I'll look at those.
Also, it might be a good idea to make the switch before the bike lane goes in,
That's right.
so that people can change their habits instead of just blasting straight through the stop signs and a switch.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. When we change traffic patterns like that and remove stop signs, it's extremely critical that we put out our verbal message signs for a couple of weeks just to warn everybody. It's really difficult. We can do it. I'll certainly take a look at it. Okay. So that's our.
One of the purposes of this is also to improve each way. Like if a bike turn, no car turn, right?
It allows for increased capacity, so a little bit better level of service, like you suggested. And, it, hopefully will do a little bit more safety. We're not having that turn lane and that opportunity for.
Talking about third
We're
west,
talking on
not
the side.
three south.
I thought you were trying to put them this way.
So I need to look at that, so. Next slide. This one will also begin here probably in March. This contract's also been awarded, through UDOT, and this is a UDOT Provo City project to realign the intersection of Canyon Road with University Avenue, which is state route, or US Route 1. So expect that will eventually be a four-legged intersection. BYU hasn't unveiled their plans of what they have planned for on the west side, but someday there'll be redevelopment on that side. This will make this intersection more safe. I do want to let you know and report back to you, for the second year in a row, we had submitted a pedestrian bridge here with the Safe Streets for All grant through Federal Highway Administration. And for the second year in a row, we got turned down. It was about an $8 million request. Wasn't that much in comparison to the $25 million maximum. We did a debrief with Federal Highway Administration. Basically, they just said you're too safe. You don't have enough fatalities in it. Even though that's on our high injury network,
It's still low.
it's still low with the big picture nationally, right?
Now, BYU is the one who wants this. Are they willing to pay for it?
BYU was a cooperative participant for funding on that, with the pedestrian bridge and with the alignment. Not doing the pedestrian bridge, just
They're paying.
nationally.
So have they been open about what they're willing to financially put into this?
They have supported it, but they haven't told us the financial. So anytime you can get BYU to write a check, let's go on to the third one. This one is the new traffic signal that's being implemented right now at 9 East and 824. That taken on. We're just out on site this morning dealing with some issues. Very tight, but this is going to improve the level of service at this intersection. We'll be able to make left turns. We'll be able to go straight through without taking your life.
And a lot more safer, excuse me, for active transportation, four-legged intersection, so you can push the button, cross safely on each direction.
We just have so many students crossing on 9 East. Really give them opportunity, four lanes of traffic at high speed.
Also supportive of the new elementary school.
Yeah, it goes right
Which
into
is
it.
good because about a third of Wasatch students are from out of boundary who come in for the Chinese immersion program. So there are people coming from 20 minutes away. There are,
To make a left turn.
and who will need to enter there, yeah.
Sorry, do we have plans to look at 900? The more problematic.
And what
From
was
safety
our-
and a traffic issue.
So we can put that on our agenda for, this year, if you'd like. I know Jeff, our vice chair, who's not here with us today, said, oh, he's on time. Oh, great. Hi, Jeff. I didn't see him. One of Jeff's priorities for TMAC, we were talking over the break, is for each of us to bring safety concerns that we're aware of in the city and talk through those this year.
And you can bring safety concerns to me anytime. It's safety concerns, almost on a daily basis.
And you respond, within 20, like, word is out there within 24 hours on the street, love it.
Especially with speed studies, we're doing a lot of those, and we're reporting back to what the outcome of those are. On 90s, so we'll bring next month, I'll write it down. Bring you the preliminary locations for the ERTs.
The sidewalks were built by BYU on both sides?
I know the east side, or west side is there.
The
I'm not
widened
sure.
ones that I'm talking about, it's from like 9th North up to.
Do they do the east side? I thought that was the city.
It's a little bit before my time.
The east side would probably BYU once you get to that multi-state church building.
They own the laundry there.
Oh, yeah, beyond that. But south of that, there's not been.
Yeah, I'm just curious, I mean, that's something in that package of thinking about 9th East that I've just talked about. Like, I appreciate that we had like a wider path, but it's pretty underutilized.
It doesn't work for bicyclists.
And it doesn't really work. I've used it occasionally and I feel totally unsafe.
I feel like I feel scary to other people when I use it as a bike.
The sidewalk at the MTC and the Student Health Center on 900 East.
It goes all the way down to the
North of
greenery.
University Parkway between
It's
Temple and.
It's like as wide as this table. I mean, it's a very wide sidewalk that's supposed to be for bikes and pedestrians, but, and there are a lot, we tried to get
There's some
signage
signage
to direct people coming down Wymount to go onto the west side of 9th East to come down, but they come barreling down the east side, which is totally dangerous because all the cars are looking left and then turning right. And so I don't think that's worked very well. And it seems like the street needs more width. You've got
It needs to be wider.
but you can still have a bike path on both sides and a pedestrian path, but I don't think you need quite that much width.
No, I think you could do something with the curb, with the bike lane on the curb. And then, like what they have in Munich, or like with the striping or a pavement differential to separate, this is the bike spot. Because one of the things that I deal with on that sidewalk a lot is if I'm on a bike, there will be groups of people often pushing strollers or other things that have occupied the entire width of the sidewalk.
And then you're all kind of like, okay, so
How do I get around?
On your left.
They think I'm some radical cyclist who wants to run them over, and I think there are people who don't pay attention to the surroundings. It really breaks down our community. You start yelling at them.
We have large amounts of children who use that to bike to Centennial for their neighborhood, and I think signage would help them. So let's include that as our 90 ordinance discussion.
The University of Colorado separates that one side will be for pedestrians, and bicyclists. Don't ever want to walk on the side. And, yeah, you want to make sure you're walking on the.
Well, that's an interesting thing about Munich is that, you know, you figure out when you're new to it, it's a little scary because you're like, okay, I got to remember that when I'm walking across the street, there's a bike path. I'm not only worried about cars, but I have to look on the bike path to make sure someone's not going to knock me over. And, you know, after a while, you get used to it, but there's a lot of potential there.
That's it from me.
And thank you for that update.
I'm sorry, I got a text from Aaron Ordmore just now. He said to let everyone know that they've just gotten an application to connect Lakeview Parkway with.
What was that again?
Yeah. Planning just got an application to connect Lakeview Parkway with 2000 North and 2000 North over with Geneva.
So it'll connect the Orem Temple down to the airport.
When you say application, what does that mean?
Honestly,
We're doing a design for it.
It's a capital improvement project, city is doing it, yes.
the city is doing it, they just have to file the paperwork with planning so that we have all the documentation.
So do we
So they
own
just
the
take
land,
that
or are you buying land?
We own everything.
You own all of it?
Yes.
Yes, all the portions that are in Provo, we own. We're working with Orem on their side, but that's a different issue.
You've already negotiated all?
Everything is on board, yes.
Yep.
So there's no other developer to worry about, it's just an internal check on our side.
That was worth announcing.
And that is in the transportation master plan, I think. Wasn't that one of
It is.
those projects that was pending, that was a big hole in the system, and now it'll be complete? That is awesome.
And just as a side note, that it was in the transportation master plan. Not only do we own it all the way to Lake Shore, but we own it from 2000 all the way over to Provo. So that's the project, and it will connect to the city.
Thank you, everyone. Good work today. We will see you next month.
We just got photographed.
Christmas card.